To make sure recording is working. Test 1, 2, 3. It looks like it's working. Everything's back to normal. Yay!
Great. Let's not jinx that.
Yeah, it looks fine. I know the in-place upgrade for Windows 10, like it seems fine.
Blue
like
screen.
Nothing seems but really everything seems pretty good. I was surprised. Yeah, I was dreading doing it last night. I downloaded the installer and then I ran the installer partly, and then I walked away while I was downloading. I'm like, you know what, I'll look at this later, and then installed Windows without me like even accepting anything. Like it's like, fuck it, I'm installing Windows now. So that was fun. I came back and my computer was like restarted, and it's like, hey, you need to start Windows now. So that was that. So we have our topic sheet for the show. I am recording. I will stop the recording and restart, and we will go ahead and get started. If I could just get a few seconds of silence. Welcome to the Android Police podcast. I know we've been gone for like ever. It's been like a month, over a month maybe. Yeah, it was my fault. It was all my fault. I'm David Ruddick.
I'm Ryan Whitwam.
I'm Cody Toombs.
I'm Jordan Palmer.
And I'm Corbin Davenport.
And I really messed up the flow by dropping into.
Yeah, I thought we were just skipping.
I wasn't ready, David.
I don't need to introduce any of you. None of it's really matter. So
we'll just switch to cold open. No one will notice.
Yeah, nobody would probably notice. They probably, nobody cares about our names. So as you know, the show's been on quite a hiatus. I won't go into the details, but basically my desktop computer like exploded. Didn't actually explode. It just got messed up. And I had to reinstall Windows, and it was a big thing, and I didn't want to do it. So I put it off for a really long time. And then I tried to record the podcast from my laptop, and that didn't work out. And we had to scrap that episode. It was just totally unlistenable. So there's no episode 263. I mean, there is. You can watch it on the YouTube channel if you really want to, but my audio is just garbage. It cuts out constantly. So we didn't release that one. Anyway, we're back. And we will be back on a bi-weekly schedule once again. So if you've been wondering where the show is, that's where it's been. There was an episode recorded. We couldn't use it. And then we were skipping a couple of weeks because of Thanksgiving and everything. And yeah, anyway, we will be back again to a once every 2 week schedule. On this week's show, we have a couple of somewhat large topics to really discuss. And we're going to start with the one that everybody's been talking about on the internet for the last week and a half. And that is net neutrality. I know we don't talk about politics usually on the show, but this is a issue of technology in politics, a very directly relevant one to probably all of our lives here in the United States. And I think it is a topic worth discussing. So, thoughts, everybody? Like net neutrality is good. I think we can all kind of like just kind of, can we just end it there?
Yeah. I mean, is everybody on the same page that we think net neutrality is a good thing? Does anybody want to take the devil's advocate position here? Or?
The opposition party is missing from this. We are a very one-sided podcast.
Yeah, I don't think there is much of an opposition party to net neutrality, except for like, cable companies and wireless providers.
I mean, and especially us, who make our livings writing on the internet about things like, the idea that that an ISP could influence the way traffic works and who can access what at what speed, I think is not something that any of us wants to have happen.
I think that's agreeable. And I mean, we've, if you've been following the internet in the last couple of weeks, you've been seeing, examples from countries like Portugal and Mexico and New Zealand, where they don't have these protections in place, and some internet providers or wireless providers, I believe wireless providers, this is much more common around the world, have started offering packages where you can access certain web services in exchange for paying a low base tier of internet. You can then add web services and things like messaging and all that kind of stuff on as packages, which is awful.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is turning the internet into cable TV.
Which is exactly what cable TV providers want. Make no bones about it.
Comcast would love if they could do that. I don't know if they could get away with that in the US. I'm sure there are lots of things they would like to do. We should probably point out the reason why this is suddenly an issue again is because the FCC has scheduled a vote for December to repeal the net neutrality rules that were put in place in, I think, 2015. When that happened, they reclassified the internet under Title II of the Telecommunications Act, which allowed the FCC to basically tell ISPs, here are the things you cannot do to the internet, and that includes things like throttling or offering paid prioritization for certain services or blocking services. So the FCC basically, they don't even want any regulations to control that now. They just want to get rid of all of them and just say, go for it.
I mean, usually I'm in favor of the concept of a free and open market, but it's pretty obvious that you can't. These companies can't be trusted, which is why I'm in strong favor of.
Yeah, it's almost like when you let one company have kind of, or a couple of companies have free reign over a major communications system. We end up with an AT&T situation. Back in the day, AT&T is essentially the reason the FCC has the power it does today, because AT&T basically owned all of the physical telephone lines in the entire country. And so they could say, well, no, there are other companies are welcome to build their own lines, but we own the only ones that are actually of any use to anybody. So it meant having to work with AT&T, and AT&T charged an exorbitant amount of money, and they were just generally not very nice to the competition, because why would they be? And that resulted in the AT&T breakup, which I believe AT&T was broken up into 5 smaller companies. There's Atlantic Bell, Pacific Bell, Southern Bell, and I think there were 2 others. Or maybe there's only one other. Maybe it was 4. Anyway, basically after that, communications companies were regulated differently, and under the specific purview of the FCC. So phone companies and cable companies as well. So as utilities, the idea that you're a public utility. And so Ajit Pai and the FCC think that, or his co-chairman on the FCC believe that the ISPs should not be regulated as utilities, because utility regulation in their eyes is too burdensome and too limiting, given the fast-moving nature of the internet business. And I've not seen this really explained ever in a way that's adequately convincing, that the regulations, the Title II regulations, are so burdensome that they actually prevent investment in internet infrastructure. There are tons of conflicting data points out there about whether or not Title II regulation increased or decreased investment by smaller ISPs, or a decreased investment by bigger ones. It's just not really clear. What we do know is that by enshrining Title II, that we're helping to preserve net neutrality, because that is by classifying cable or classifying ISPs under Title II, the FCC then took on the ability to regulate them, and one of the regulations was net neutrality. So I think that we would it's like like we said, we all are in support of it here in terms of net neutrality, and you would think that, oh well, there's got to be a pretty good argument on the other side about why you wouldn't want to enshrine net neutrality into it's not a law, but it's code, it's federal code. And I mean, what I've seen is this kind of vague notion: regulation is bad because it deters investment. But at no point since Tom Wheeler and under the Obama administration, the FCC reclassified ISPs and enforced these net neutrality rules, has there been any huge ill effect on the ISP industry. Comcast and Time Warner just as dominant as ever.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's very telling that back when the regulations were put into effect, Comcast and Verizon and other ISPs, they had their quarterly earnings calls where they are legally required to tell the truth to their investors. And they all said that this isn't going to significantly impact our business. It's not going to change the way we invest. And I mean, and indeed, in the last 2 years, I think internet speeds have gone up. I know mine have here. My internet has been getting faster. I think Comcast boosted speeds in most markets. it just doesn't seem like there's been any negative impact for consumers, at least, since net neutrality was put into effect. And I have yet to see any example of what an ISP could do without net neutrality that sounds like a thing I'm interested in.
And I've yet to hear a convincing argument against net neutrality, other than shit from shills and apologists.
Yeah, it's I mean, we've been having this conversation for ages. I remember back when I first started writing about technology. One of the first articles I ever wrote was about the net neutrality debate, and that was in like, I don't know, 2008 maybe. And here we are, all these years later. We're still arguing about how we should regulate ISPs, or if we should regulate them, I guess.
And I think the kind of the point is that, like, well, who is against net neutrality? Well, it's the ISPs, and it's pretty much just them. And the other side, on the other camp, you have people who don't care, which is most Americans, sadly, and people who do care, who universally think net neutrality is a good thing. It's kind of like,
you know what, Comcast especially, but the other ISPs do. They always try to pay lip service to net neutrality. Comcast put up that page a couple years ago where they're like, here are the principles of net neutrality that we believe should be upheld, and one of them was like common sense regulations, and they said, we won't block, we won't throttle, we won't do paid prioritization. But then as soon as the FCC announced this year that they were going to work on repealing the regulations, they updated that page to remove that bit about paid prioritization, which I think is where they want to go. Like that's going to be their first salvo after net neutrality is ended. They're going to start offering some sort of service to their partners to speed up their data, the fast lane, so to speak.
Yeah, the fast lane argument is definitely the big one out there. And we've already seen that cable providers and content providers already have a lot of fights about speeds on networks. So, for example, if you are a Comcast subscriber and you have a data package that's rated at 300 megabits per second, and you watch YouTube at 7 p.m. on a weeknight, you're probably going to have a bad time. Even though YouTube's maximum bit rate is, even with 4K, I think something like 14 megabits or 20 megabits, something really low. And we've already seen that even with net neutrality in place, ISPs and these content providers will fight over speeds. And the reason for that is, if you follow the interconnect dispute with Netflix and Comcast, basically a huge part of the way the internet works, especially for massive content delivery as well, Netflix has to build out their network capacity to deliver the content to people, and then in turn expects reciprocation from companies like Comcast or companies like Level 3, where they have these contracts for traffic for interconnect agreements. Netflix has become its own interconnect provider in recent years, and so is negotiating directly with the ISPs. It still uses third parties like Level 3, but it's also got its own interconnect equipment. And so basically, at one point, I think Comcast said, we won't match you. We're not going to match your build out, even though that's what we do with all of our interconnect providers. We won't do that because we don't think it's fair, because you're producing too much traffic. And it's already clear. It should already be crystal clear that the internet providers out there have something against certain companies and would like to be able to leverage their businesses in a way that extracts more favorable terms from those companies that use their services heavily.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially Netflix, just because of the volume of data, they would like very much to get a piece of the money that Netflix is making.
It's pretty understandable, because when you really think about the options out there, Netflix is really dependent on being able to deliver a high quality image, especially with like 4K becoming very quickly a standard for a lot of people. YouTube is in a similar spot. Obviously, you can look to smaller companies or smaller services like Hulu and Vimeo. They're all basically in this spot where they're kind of competing with each other over quality. Because if people are getting a crappy image out of one of them, they're going to just stop watching it and go to something else. And watch whatever that other service has to offer. So it's at some point it can become a bidding war between these companies as they're trying to make sure that they have a good enough throughput. And one of the big concerns also is this isn't necessarily just about pay to play. It can also become a pay to undermine system where no one's talking about that as much, but there's no policy or rule, at least under the FCC's terms, that would prevent, let's say, Fox from undermining Hulu, basically paying, let's say, Charter or Cox to just give them less bandwidth. So it can actually become a very vicious cycle of basically whoever has the most money will be guaranteed the win.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the flip side of the fast lane stuff, is actually slowing down content that they do not have a financial interest in. And I feel like that's something that ISPs would probably like to do, but they know they can't get away with that right away. They sort of need to lull us into this false sense of security by saying, no, we're just going to have a fast lane and it's only going to be for, certain things. I keep hearing them talk about like medical apps or like some sort of like telemedicine services that should have prioritization. Like how, in what way does that make any sense? Like your telemedicine app doesn't work with like 50 milliseconds of latency. I think there's something wrong.
And if it was something like that, can't that be that I think we could government regulate? If there's really some high need for something to have priority, that let's create a rule and say, okay, for medical purposes, yes, we can let this tiny amount of data go through with priority over your Netflix subscription. That's fine. Like, that's not asking that much.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem to be something people should be paying for.
Yeah, you don't have to get rid of all of the regulations on ISPs to make things like that feasible.
And the ultimate concern really is also that this could go even further into one of the things people suggested is Comcast, for example, could basically shut off connectivity to sites that are critical of Comcast's service and quality. It could even become a situation where companies are asking for critical sites to be blocked out, or even the government could basically say, hey, we're not really cool with sites that cover this kind of thing. Let's just have all the communications companies just make them slow. Not necessarily cut them off, but just make them bad enough no one wants to go there anymore.
Yeah. I think the other thing to probably look at is what's happened in the United States in the wireless internet industry, which a lot of people don't understand this, but the wireless internet is not regulated in the same way as landline internet, especially after Title II changes. So wireless internet providers have special rules written into the FCC code that exempt them from a lot of the kind of net neutrality principles that landline providers are now forced to adhere to. Some of those, for example, basically say, well, we're going to give wireless providers a lot more leeway on traffic management. If they can show that a certain type of content or a certain something is impacting the performance of their network in a significant way, they can mess with that, and it's not going to run afoul of net neutrality because they have special needs. And we've already seen, for example, Verizon has become once again emboldened by probably the changing political winds to just kind of flat out say, nah, we're going to stream all your video in 480p now. Just like you can buy your way out of it if you want, and we're already seeing that, by making these companies more comfortable with the idea that net neutrality isn't this wall they're going to run up against, probably, that they're already going to start changing policies. We were already seeing it, like we said, with Comcast taking out the language on their website about net neutrality principles. Verizon has gotten more aggressive. I think we'll see T-Mobile probably be just as aggressive as ever. T-Mobile has always been pushing the envelope on what is acceptable. in terms of net neutrality. And T-Mobile's done it under the guise of basically voluntary participation, where they say, we don't throttle content, we have partners who optimize it. You know, with the basically kind of the implication being, well, if you don't participate in our optimization and you're a big service and use a lot of data, well, maybe we use our, you know, kind of leeway to throttle certain things if they're using too many network resources. Then what happens? You know, your viewers can't see their content. That would be a shame, right? And so I think that's always been T-Mobile's game there. And I think the same thing with their binge on music and everything. It's always been their play. And now with, you know, the political environment changing, you know, other providers, you know, are probably going to feel emboldened. I mean, Sprint's already done some pretty aggressive stuff, but nobody really talks about it because who cares about Sprint? Exactly. So
I mean, and with wireless carriers, it's less of a I think it's less burdensome to consumers, because in most places you could go to a different wireless carrier, but it is much harder to find an alternative wireline internet provider. In a lot of places you have effectively one choice. You have a cable company that is fast and a DSL provider that is extremely slow. And some people have like a fiber option. But you know, if your ISP decides that they're going to implement some horrible anti-net neutral policy, you're probably kind of stuck with it.
Yeah, I can actually attest to that, because Comcast is actually the only provider in my area. So it's either Comcast or I get super slow satellite internet that can't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I have either Comcast or very slow DSL. Those are my options.
So Braves fan 1 points out they throttle now with net neutrality. So as with wireless providers, cable companies do have special exemptions if they can prove that there's a undue burden on the network. They can control or shape certain kinds of traffic. I think that the bar is significantly higher. With wireless carriers, there's a presumption of innocence. With wireline providers, they have to show that something's being messed up. Now, whether that's changed in the last year with any wireline providers and their behavior, I don't know. It's quite possible some of them have kind of tested the waters in terms of, are we going to get sued for this? And, you know, given the, you know, regulatory climate, the answer is probably not. So I think I know there'd been some talk about Comcast and BitTorrent traffic again, because there has been over and over, you know, for the last like 20 years.
I was gonna say that's a recurring topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember even since like Napster happened, and within like a year, there was already somebody that was throttling Napster traffic.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, yeah, I don't know who it was in the Napster years, but yeah, I think that, you know, we'll probably see some frankly bad behavior from ISPs, even if this, you know, this change to the regulation doesn't go through in the near future. But it seems like it's going to. I mean, the FCC is putting on blinders. They don't seem to care about public opinion.
Yeah, they've become a very like weirdly partisan organization. Mm-hmm. I mean, like there's always been a lot of politics in FCC policymaking, but I mean they're saying things, specifically Chairman Ajit Pai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he's been saying things that I think are demonstrably false. It is a very like fake news situation right now.
It is, and he's been very inflammatory towards any detractors. He's actually gotten into Twitter battles with the only name I can remember off the top of my head is Cher.
Yeah. It was that was a pretty surreal headline to read the other day.
Oh, it really was. Geez, who else was it? I had it pulled up on my phone just a second ago. But yeah, this guy has been like calling out celebrities who are saying, no, this is a bad thing. And he's firing back with nothing. Literally just either made up facts or basically just saying, no, you're wrong. Trust me, I know better than you. Some of the other people he's taken shots at is Mark Ruffalo, the Hulk from the Avengers, Kumail Nanjiani, sorry, I'm
The
terrible.
guy
at
from
that name.
Silicon Valley.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a few others. It's like, seriously, he's kind of turned. He feels like a better spoken version of Trump in that he wants to go to Twitter and fight the battles out there because it's the place where it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, you have to remember the fact that, I mean, I don't want to get too far into executive branch politics
Right.
on our podcast, but the FCC is an executive branch organization. It does not answer to the will of the people. It answers to the will of the executive. And I'm certain that Ajit Pai getting into slap fights with people on Twitter may have something to do with that relationship, and the fact that, you know, the FCC still has to, at the end of the day, get the approval of the president in what it's doing. Not that I think they have any problems there at the current time. I just think that, Ajit Pai seems to come across as a man on a mission to deregulate the internet, and he'll come up with whatever reason he can to do it. It's not a matter of, I have the data, this shows that things will be better. He philosophically disagrees with the idea that the internet should be regulated in this way. And it seems like he is unwilling to be convinced otherwise by anybody. He's never even indicated an openness to the idea. He just thinks, nope, the government should not be involved with this, period, end of story.
Well, is it government regulating the internet or internet service providers?
It's government regulating the internet service providers.
Right, and that's the fault that people are having, is it's not regulating the internet. It's regulating these companies that have proven time and time and time again that they cannot be trusted on their own.
Well, and going back to Ajit Pai, it's worth keeping in mind that this guy, many years ago, this is a long time ago, used to work for Verizon. He, since going back into the government, has done nothing but basically target net neutrality. He is very much a keen fan of it. He's been very outspoken about shutting down net neutrality since the beginning. And even when he was appointed by Donald Trump to head up the FCC, his exact position was that he wanted to take down the net neutrality rules. So there was never a mystery about this. What's really, I think, telling is he waited until Thanksgiving week here in the US, so a holiday week, to announce this, and they're rushing this to a vote in mid-December.
Oh,
So
without a
about
doubt,
2
the
weeks from
timing
now.
is so intentional. I mean, Ajit Pai is clearly a very smart guy. Also, you listen to him in interviews. He's such a nice guy. He comes off like so agreeable, and that's, you know, that's part of the thing. Like, I think that he understands what he's doing, and he understands why it's deeply unpopular with people who actually care about it. And I think he knows that he will never, ever, ever convince those people who disagree with him that what he's doing is beneficial. I think his whole goal is to kind of whitewash the issue and say, well, it's not that really big of a deal. We did this, you know, we didn't have it this way for years. It was never a problem. Now regulations. There's so many of them. It's out of control. And I think that it just comes down to, if he feels confident that he will not instigate significant political backlash against Donald Trump's administration by, you know, changing these rules at the FCC, he's going to do it. He's already decided.
I mean, in any other administration, this would be somewhat of a risk. I think right now people are too exhausted by all of the other things happening to really pay that much attention.
Oh, I completely agree. There's so much other stuff going on that net neutrality is just going to get put on the back burner, and I think he understands that pretty well. Just, you know, you can look at the news on any given day in the last week, and there are things that are, you know, probably more important on a grand scale going on than what Ajit Pai is trying to do to the internet.
Well, I think it's that there's a lot of other things that are more understandable. You can still walk up to the average person and say net neutrality, just explain it in one sentence. More than half of any Americans would look at you and go, wait, I know I've read that term. Can you tell me?
Yeah.
They're not going to know.
People don't know. They don't understand. Now, if you explained it, like, you know, if you explained in the context of, you know, the history of the if anybody's old enough to, you know, remember the issue with AT&T, or to remember, you know, basically, you know, a lot of the, you know, how basically just tell people, hey, you know how awful like cable TV is? Yeah, imagine if they did that to the internet. Okay. That's pretty much what the argument boils down to, I think, on a normal everyday people basis. And I think in that case, most people would say, I don't want to pay for a Facebook channel. People are very against paying for almost anything on the internet. Why would they want to pay for more internet things?
I mean, and I feel like anything that ISPs do in an environment where there is no net neutrality is going to cost people more money.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other problem is there's just no competition. Like you can't say, oh, screw you, Comcast, I'm going somewhere else.
So I think, and that's true, there is no competition right now. I think that is probably about to change in the next 10 years.
Like if 5G wireless is a viable way to get your internet at home, that would loosen things up. You know, you would presumably have more choices for your internet access.
Yeah, so who's going to be the provider most of the
Verizon.
time?
I don't know. I mean, fingers crossed, maybe Google.
It's going to be a lot of the same companies.
It's going to be Verizon. And so earlier this week, a story, Verizon released a press release saying our first 5G home internet city is going to be Sacramento in California. So the way 5G internet works, as I understand it, is basically you get a tower in your neighborhood. Actually, you can probably have one. Basically, you would have like a router, you know, in your house, and an antenna would go out to your roof. You know, they'd have to wire it through the roof, and that will connect to a neighborhood tower. But it's not really a tower; it's just a fancy repeater, and that repeater connects via probably via hard line to the fiber in the street. And at that point, you've got direct access. It's basically a hardline connection. Verizon's just, you know, Verizon's whole hope. So if you remember Verizon, when they announced Fios, it was a big deal. The government gave them a bunch of breaks to roll out fiber internet to a bunch of neighborhoods in the United States. Once the tax breaks dried up, Verizon stopped investing because building out fiber is really expensive, as Google learned too.
That's also what happened to Google Fiber, is it was really expensive.
Digging up driveways is pretty pricey when you're talking about tens of thousands of them, or hundreds of thousands. And so Verizon basically gave up on Fios expansion. You know, Fios made its way to some cities in the United States, and where it is, it's very fast and it's pretty affordable considering how fast it is. But Verizon had to stop that whole rollout because of the issues they had with cost. They couldn't justify the investment. They didn't think they were going to get their money back. 5G supposedly is going to enable a huge reduction in the last mile cost. That's where fiber failed, was the last mile cost. 5G will let you do all that wirelessly. The last mile will just be wireless. And so you'll have antennas in houses, and you'll have a signal repeater using, you know, proven existing technology, and that'll just connect to the fiber that's probably already somewhere in a major avenue or street nearby. And at that point, well, you may crack the code on the landline internet situation. I don't know the exact economics of the whole thing. I don't claim to fully understand all of it, but I do know that Verizon seems pretty serious about this, and Verizon has no horse in the Comcast Spectrum Time Warner race. They want to break into those markets. They do want to take customers away, because they understand that people are frustrated and they don't like their ISPs. ISPs are generally the least liked companies in the United States every year on consumer satisfaction surveys.
Pretty close with them and EA.
And
airlines.
Yeah, and airlines. So, like, if you could disrupt the landline internet business, I think that the competition could suddenly get more fierce. And again, there's nothing about net neutrality that makes what Verizon is trying to do with 5G any harder. That's not an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like, Verizon obviously is already doing this stuff, but I still have some hope that Google Fiber will work with the wireless thing. Like Google has talked about doing wireless stuff instead of, you know, the fiber to the home stuff. And that would be nice. I would really like that. I would like Google to be able to compete with established ISPs, because for better or worse, I trust Google more than I trust Comcast or Verizon.
Yeah, I think that, I would like to see Google do that. I think Verizon, though, probably already has the vision and business plan. And Google probably is like, hey, so, what's up with this 5G business? I think that AT&T is also experimenting with it. And I'm sure T-Mobile and Sprint would like to also get into that.
Yeah,
because
AT&T was experimenting with putting 5G towers on normal phone lines a while back.
Yeah, they were looking at that, the Project Air gig, which is very interesting. I don't know if AT&T will actually go through with that, but the concept was super fascinating. I think that definitely we are going to see wireless providers make a play for landline internet style access because they can do what cable companies have been doing for years. They can bundle, and the bundle deals will be bundleicious.
Yeah, you can just share your data cap across your smartphone and your home internet. And
Don't you want a T-Mobile triple play package?
There will finally be like a reason to have that T-Mobile TV garbage app that I always uninstall. So they'll have their own TV.
Well, Comcast is already trying that. They have their Xfinity Mobile now.
Yeah, of course. Comcast wants to go in the opposite direction because you're like, it's getting the headwinds, guys. They're getting a bit strong. So I think that, I would say that, obviously we all support net neutrality, and I'm totally for it too. And I think that getting rid of these regulations would be just bad, and would harm the internet. I do think that the United States is finally is going to turn a point where there will be a kind of a challenge to the powers that be in the landline internet industry, albeit from companies we also hate. But they will be competing with each other. So, they might try a little bit to make us hate them less, in exchange for our business. So,
we can only hope.
Yeah, I think that the landscape is going to change significantly. And with that, I think that we spent enough time on this topic. Let's talk about something that is in no way highly, controversial or a bit of a hot button issue right now.
Yeah, let's have some drama. Let's do this.
Let's do some drama. So Andy Rubin, just we're completely switching gears here, is taking a leave of absence from Essential. The timing of this leave of absence is, to say the least, a little bit concerning. So the Information published a story on Tuesday saying that Andy Rubin, while he was the head of Android at Google, they didn't say what year or anything, was the subject of a complaint to Google Human Resources that Andy was involved in an inappropriate relation with a subordinate. The person who reported this to Human Resources was the subordinate. So that doesn't sound so great.
Yeah, that sounds pretty messy.
Yeah, it sounds bad. And so I think, basically the investigation, by the time it concluded, Google did an internal investigation. It concluded in 2014, right before Andy Rubin left Google. By that time, he had left the Android division. In early 2013, he took like a little leave and then came on to head the robotics division at Google, which failed.
Yeah. They bought him Boston Dynamics, and he's like, nah.
Oh man, my Google Home got that one too. So anyway, so Andy Rubin by that time was doing something else, but apparently the timing of the conclusion of the investigation into this inappropriate relationship and the time that Andy Rubin left was a bit of an issue in terms of them being very close together. Now, Andy Rubin's spokesperson, Andy Rubin hasn't said anything himself publicly about this. According to Andy Rubin's spokesperson, speaking to the Information, Andy Rubin was never engaged in any non-consensual relationships with anyone at Google. And as far as he understood the situation, according to the spokesperson, he was not subject of any disciplinary action or formal misconduct. The Information puts it a little differently and says that the investigation concluded that Rubin's relationship was inappropriate and that he acted with poor judgment. Whether or not that represents an official strike on his record, I guess, is another question, and probably one that will not be answered. So the situation's messy. And yes, I think that, as people have pointed out, I think that, what I hear here is, well, it sounds like there was a workplace relationship between two people that was, against Google's rules. Google doesn't let people who are bosses of other people be in a relationship with somebody you're the boss of. Supervisors and their subordinates cannot.
That is pretty common at
Yeah,
I think
very common.
any company.
Yeah, it's very common. And so usually the resolution is to report that to somebody in human resources, at which point one of the people in the relationship will be assigned to a different area such that they don't work under or over that person.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that there was a complaint filed by the other person in this relationship indicates probably that something got messy personally, and there was a workplace sort of disagreement about how to move forward.
I think that so what's also been pointed out to me in one of the comments on our post is that and I don't want to dig too messy into people's personal lives, but Andy Rubin is married. Like I looked into it, and yeah, like as of like this 2010 article in the San Jose Mercury, like it's like, oh, Andy Rubin has a wife and a kid, and well, whether or not, people are welcome to do whatever they want in their lives, I would not judge at all. But whether or not the information maybe just toss a firebomb on Andy Rubin's home life, that's one possibility. It's also possible that this is going to get worse as more information comes out. We don't really know. I just think that, there are potentially different explanations. So either way, it sounds like probably a good time for Andy Rubin to take that leave of absence.
Yeah, but so right now, so he's not showing up at Essential every morning. So they are on their own for the time being. I don't know how much he had to do like day to day at the company. So it might, things might proceed normally, or
I think Andy Rubin's a pretty notorious micromanager.
Yeah,
so
famously.
Yeah, so
they'll have to keep dropping the price without him.
Oh, ouch, burn.
I mean, it's not like Essential has been running particularly well with Rubin at the helm.
No.
Yeah.
So maybe this will work out okay. Did they
Yeah.
say like who was going to be in charge while he's away? Or?
The obviously competent CEO, Nicholas Damati, or whatever his name is. Nicolo Damati, I forget his name. Anyway, that guy, the guy who posted the crappy pictures from the camera.
Ah, yes. That
guy that came out.
No, that's not super encouraging.
That was a good decision.
Yeah, it was a real good one. So I think that at this point, unless more information comes out and it's bad, which, I would not discount the possibility of. But if it doesn't, this is probably just Andy Rubin understanding that he can't be in the spotlight right now. It's better for him just to step away. And it's possible also that maybe his home life is, a little impacted by the situation, and maybe that's why he took the time. We don't really know. And honestly, if that is the case, it's none of our business. Frankly,
Yes.
this borders this to me borders very close to gossip, unless there are things that are bad that were happening that we have yet to hear about.
Well,
So we just have to wait and see, I guess.
Right now, I think the real question is, will this turn into like a month-long or 2-month-long leave, or is this going to be longer? It really depends on, one, if more stories come out, which from the way this sounds, I don't think any will. And if this does turn into like a major catastrophe with a family, obviously it could run longer. Otherwise, it becomes that question of, will this really impact the company, or is this just going to be sort of a short-term thing? He'll be gone while it dies down, and by the time he comes back, everyone will have just moved on.
Yeah, I think that's the likely case, and I think that's probably part of why he took the leave. Now,
And that's what I think everyone's hoping for.
Yeah, so I think that it is, these kind of situations go. This one so far doesn't seem super bad. Again, I am, remain completely open-minded to the possibility that it could get super bad, because honestly, that's how these things kind of turn out sometimes. So
you know what is super bad though? The comments on that story on the website.
oh, the comments.
I recommend people don't.
I got like
comments are
8 kinds of cancer from those comments.
They're
I am
so
riddled
bad,
with
guys.
cancer after that post.
Good job, commenters.
I specifically worded that whole post in the most bland, like just white bread way possible, to just not even make it worse than it had to be. And still, it was just like, well, I knew what I was going to get. I knew that was going to happen. So, I think we can probably wash our hands of that and talk about, kind of the stuff that, we actually talk about on this show, phones.
Oh, is that what we talk about?
I guess sometimes.
I forgot.
On the monthly AP podcast.
Yes. Bi-weekly. It'll get back to bi-weekly. So the OnePlus 5T, Ryan has one. He reviewed it. I have one as well. I used it for a little while. My take was, this is the 5, but better and more modern, and that's good.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. They want you to pay $20 extra for the 5, but with a bigger screen and a couple of small software tweaks and a fingerprint sensor on the back. So it feels very much like, like what OnePlus always does, where they sort of look at what other smartphone makers are doing. They're like, how can we do that, but a little bit cheaper? So the 5T, it has a 6-inch 18:9 screen instead of the 5.5 16:9 screen on the 5. So it's doing the thing that a lot of phones are doing now, where it has the taller screen ratio, so it takes up more of the face of the phone. Because of that, OnePlus has moved to on-screen buttons. So the hardware buttons are gone, and the fingerprint sensor is now on the back of the phone. I like that. I like the fingerprint sensor there, and I never liked OnePlus's capacitive buttons, so I am on board with that change. That is great. I am a little bit concerned about the way the fingerprint sensor feels on the back. It's almost completely flush with the aluminum, so it's kind of hard to sort of feel out sometimes when you're not looking at the back of the phone for it. The display, it doesn't do the jelly scrolling thing anymore. They I guess they put it on the right way, because on the 5 they had the screen mounted upside down, which made the scrolling look a little bit weird sometimes. That never really bothered me. I think some people's eyes are just different than mine, and they notice that, and a lot of people just refuse to use the phone because of it. The internals of this phone are almost exactly the same as a 5. It's still a very fast phone. It's almost Nexus fast, or not, almost Pixel fast a lot of the time. It feels like, it's not as smooth as the Pixel. I feel like, David, do you have feelings on this?
To me, nothing is probably going to feel as smooth as the Pixel and Pixel 2, just because of the kind of attention Google's paid to transitions and everything.
Yeah, it's like things happen on the OnePlus 5T about as fast, but it's like it drops frames where necessary to make that happen, whereas the Pixel just always feels very fluid.
Yeah, I would say so. The way I describe OnePlus's phones is kind of like I described LG or Moto sometimes. Things feel manic, not necessarily smooth, where it feels like the animations are sped up to make it feel very, very fast, which it still is very fast. Don't get me wrong. But you still get those little jitters and janks and stutters that I think are kind of endemic to most smartphones, whereas Google seems to have really, really focused on making sure that the processor is awake and able to devote time to the UI thread in a way that ensures that everything looks right all the time, versus trying to hide behind ultra fast animations. HTC does it too. So I think it's fast, definitely. Necessarily as smooth as the Pixels? Probably not.
Yeah, but for the price, I think that the phone performs impressively. Even for $20 more, I think it's a pretty good deal. I don't think at $500 I would recommend an Essential phone over the 5T, just because the camera on the Essential phone is still really rough, and I don't love the camera on the 5T. In fact, I think they probably should not have done the new module this time. So with the OnePlus 5, they had a telephoto secondary camera. This time, their secondary camera is just like this weird low light thing. And they still have not explained this satisfactorily to me. But it's 20 megapixels instead of 16 like the main sensor. and you would think that it wouldn't. I mean, it has the same aperture and everything, but they're doing some sort of processing tech. They call it intelligent pixel technology, I think, that makes it better in low light. I mean, and I took some photos in like extreme low light with the 5T and the 5, and yeah, and the 5T does pull in more light. But the problem is that the difference between those two, it's not going to be a bad photo that you can't use and a good photo. It's like a little bit more light. It's just going to be a slightly less ugly picture. And I hate that it doesn't tell you what lens it is using. It's the same thing they did on the 5, where if it was too dark, it wouldn't use the telephoto lens. It would use the main lens and zoom, but you had no way of knowing that. It's the same deal now. Like when it gets below 10 lux of brightness, it'll switch to the low light lens. It just seems like just a waste of resources to add this secondary camera that is just of limited usefulness. But I mean, in general, like it's a good camera for the price. The outdoor shots look nice. The HDR is kind of weak, but passable. It opens quickly. It snaps photos pretty quickly. The indoor shots are okay, but better than what you get on like a $250, $300 phone.
So we have a good chat topic that I want to get to in a minute, but I will say, as far as the camera goes, I feel like I would trust OnePlus more with the camera just because they've been making phones longer, and also they have Oppo. Oppo seems to care about cameras. Whether or not the cameras are great, like, is another question entirely. But Oppo does seem to care, and so since Oppo Shadow owns OnePlus, I feel like, well, that seems to be a safer bet.
Don't say that to OnePlus though. They will try to correct you without actually
providing any proof. Yeah, it's true. I definitely agree that the secondary camera on this phone seems like a total afterthought. More like, well, there's already a second hole on the frame we're going to use. So what do you guys want? Like, I think
kind of like what HTC did with the Ultra Pixel, or
it is actually.
The
really.
pixels are actually smaller because it's a higher resolution. Mm-hmm. I feel like I asked them about this and I didn't get a good answer. I feel like it's doing some sort of like software thing to like make the pixels act like larger single pixels, but this was not clear to me.
Mine's coming soon, so I'm looking forward to.
I have one coming as well.
So a lot of people bought Essential phones and OnePlus 5Ts. So between those two phones, I think that's a good topic to kind of talk about. So one thing that the Essential phone has that the OnePlus decidedly does not is Project Treble. And as long as Essential sticks around, I think that will have a tangible effect on the speed at which updates are available.
Yeah, I mean, OnePlus right now, you're going to get one big update and maybe a second somewhat late.
Yeah. I think that the other thing, as Google showed with the Pixel 2, Project Treble is allowing them to extend the amount of time that they can offer Android OS updates to devices. And I think that's probably going to hold true for partners too, at least ones who will profess to care about that.
It's a very short list right now of companies that do.
Essential delivered or is delivering Treble as an update too, which is not required. Only phones that ship with Oreo have to have that. So I mean, good on them for doing that. And OnePlus, they actually said like people were asking them if they were going to do this because it's the sort of thing that you thought you would think OnePlus might do because they're very sort of plugged into what enthusiasts want, and they had to say nope, we are not planning to do that. So. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
that comes down. You know what? That comes down to the whole Oppo relationship. They will never say it, but I guarantee that Oppo people are still working on a lot of the firmware that OnePlus ends up using for the boards and stuff. So you know what? That's OnePlus kind of showing their colors because you know what? If they could do it, I bet they would, but they can't because it's out of their control. So I think that's probably the issue for them. Because I'm sure they hate knowing that they have to be hamstrung like this. I mean, the new OnePlus came out it came out after the Pixels, significantly after them. Like you guys didn't have much of an excuse here.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that they're launching it with Nougat. That is unacceptable.
Yeah, so I think that between the two phones, I mean, the Essential phone, for one, I used one when it first came out, like before it was out, and I remember thinking, "Wow, this phone the frame rate sucks."
Yeah, it was just so weird. Like it would be blazing fast for like a few seconds, and then all of a sudden it would grind to a halt, and then it would be fast again, and then it would stop, and it was so poorly optimized.
Yeah, it was. And, I mean, some people have continued to say that the performance is not fantastic, which, given the chipset in it, it should be pretty good.
Yeah, it should.
But so has anybody tried the Oreo beta yet? I mean,
on the 5?
No, the
the
Essential
Essential.
phone.
I have
I don't
not.
have one, so I
Okay.
can't.
I'll be curious to see if the Oreo beta speeds things up. That would be nice. I'm getting an Essential phone tomorrow, I think, so I will flash the beta on there and see how it goes. I mean, I would like that phone. I think the camera is definitely, to me, if I was choosing between the OnePlus and the Essential, I'd go OnePlus every time just because I know OnePlus does a better job on the camera. Also, I think you get a little more for your money with OnePlus in terms of, so the Essential phone is 64 gigabytes, but, I think with,
It is, I thought it was isn't 128, isn't it?
Oh, all of them are 128?
I think.
Right? Okay. Well, maybe that if you need a lot of storage, yeah, that could be an option. Why am I getting an Essential phone? Because I asked Essential for one. I didn't buy it. So I bought the iPhone X. Apple does not give out iPhones to Android blogs. Surprise. So I'm curious to try out the Oreo beta on it, definitely. And I think Project Treble support is an important consideration if you plan on keeping the phone longer than a year.
Also, if you really care about custom ROMs.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. It would be interesting if custom ROMs sort of became a thing again, because they've definitely been going away in the last few years.
Yeah. I used to be a huge ROM guy, and
I mean, I think all of us were at least somewhat interested in ROMs for a while there. Because
I wouldn't buy a phone if I couldn't put a custom ROM on it.
Yeah, like it was easier to do. Like it didn't come with all these caveats like it does now. I mean, like you could just like flash a ROM on your phone and like later in the day, like flash a different one if you wanted.
Yeah. My tablet is still running Lineage because it's an older Samsung tablet, so TouchWiz is gross. And then I also have it on like a really old, I don't remember, just some phone I've had for years. But yeah, Treble's really interesting when it comes to custom ROMs because I'm trying to find the post. But okay, so there's one developer on XDA that basically made a single ROM. So it's a single system image that can boot on like 8 different phones because they all support Treble.
And that's because Treble has the vendor implementation that interacts with all of the hardware, and the system stuff just plugs in on top.
Yeah. And there is, it's not perfect. There is a lot of bugs, but just the fact that you can run the same thing on so many different phones is really cool. And that's never
accidentally flashing the wrong ROM.
Yeah. And that's never been a thing before. It's really cool.
Yeah, that is pretty neat, definitely. And I think Project Treble is, I remember when you first heard about Treble at Google I/O, and I was talking to Artem about it, and he's telling me this is basically like, what we've been asking for years, how with Windows, drivers exist in their own space, and Microsoft signs all of them and, certifies them to work with a given level of a given version of the operating system. And if you upgrade the operating system, you don't have to worry about that. The drivers are their own thing. That can stick around. Granted, they may need to be updated if incompatibilities emerge. But the idea with this is you can update the operating system of the phone independent of the drivers in a way that shouldn't break things. Not necessarily won't always, but shouldn't break things nearly as much. Whereas before, every vendor would have to go to Qualcomm. They would have to go to probably the display controller vendor. They would have to go to every piece in the supply chain where there's a piece of firmware. They'd have to go there and say, hey, does your part work with this new version of Android? Some things probably it's less of a concern. You just expect it to work because certain things are supported. But Qualcomm, I think, was definitely the big one where they had to wait and know. And if it wasn't supported, then, well, a phone didn't get that Android OS update, even if, maybe if you put the update on there, you could probably basically break it into working, there are probably going to be issues. And so this
it's not the sort of thing that you would roll out to consumers.
Yeah. So I think with Treble, this is a big deal, and we'll see that in terms of the speed of updates, especially on these phones from smaller companies. I bet that want to prove themselves, like OnePlus, like Essential, and probably Motorola. I hope. I just hope Motorola can get its crap together with Treble, because that would be good.
The other interesting thing about Treble is that there have been so many cases in the past where phones could easily run newer versions of Android, but they were held back by device drivers.
Yep.
Like how the Nexus 5 never got Nougat, because just no phones with was it the 801? The 801 ever? Yeah. So I don't think there was any phones with that chip that ever got Nougat.
Yeah, it was plenty fast. Obviously, it met the specification requirements and everything. That wasn't the issue. It was the chipset drivers not being supported on the version of the OS. So I think with Treble, we'll hopefully see a lot of that start to get ironed out in a significant way. Whether with bigger vendors, that's going to make as much of a difference, especially here in America, where they have to work with the carriers. I don't know. But with the unlocked phone scene, I think that will make things a lot better. Nokia could be another one, for example. Anyway, to get back to the question we were asked, we weren't asked this. We're asked G6 Plus or Essential phone, and those seem both like, well, I get the Essential phone, I guess. But I would say between the Essential phone and the OnePlus 5T, if I had to keep the phone for 2 years, I'd probably go with the Essential phone for Treble, because I care about Android OS updates, and I know I would be mad if my OnePlus 5T had to wait too long for Android 9.0 or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. It's just I have never adjusted to the notch on the screen. I break out the Essential phone every now and then to play around with it, to just see if I can forget that it's there. But man, I just don't. I don't like it. I think it was a bad design decision.
Yep, tend to agree.
Yeah, after using the Mi Mix 2, it's hard to look at the iPhone X or the Essential phone because no notch.
Yeah.
But you still get the weird status bar scaling.
Yeah. At least Essential, they updated the way the status bar stuff works. So now most apps will draw up there. It's not just black. That makes it look a little bit nicer, but still, the giant status bar is just awkward.
So I think that this isn't so much an issue with Essential as it is with the fact that Android isn't designed around, having a screen that's shaped that way, or has that, we'll say, shape challenge, because it is a shape challenge. I've been using the iPhone X now for 2 weeks, and apps that are updated to use the notch the right way, like I haven't encountered any of the UI weirdness that other people have. I've seen posted on Twitter and stuff. Apps that support it the right way, it looks right. It looks totally normal. The notch does not bother me in the slightest. What's terrible is when the notch is not supported by an app and it presents in like 4/3 aspect ratio and everything looks terrible. That drives me nuts. So I would say that the whole notch thing on the Essential phone, I made fun of it a lot when it was announced. After using the iPhone X, the Essential phone notch is like, I would not be that concerned by it on a philosophical level. Now, on a level of, is Android software ever going to accommodate this in a meaningful way? I'd probably be a little more concerned, because that is what makes or breaks it for me. If the software can work around the notch and look rightish, then it's okay. If it's always going to be this sore spot, no, thank you. It will bug me. And the whole issue with video and the notch or whatever, I think that's overplayed. I don't ever notice. I don't think it's going to bother most people. With the
Essential, the thing with the iPhone is that all the developers are targeting it is because it's Apple's new main phone. But
yeah,
I don't think any developers are going to care about what the software looks like on one phone.
Yep.
From a third-party OEM that no one buys.
It's a little bit more serious than that. Apple's SDK makes it I'm not going to say automatic, but they make it really, really easy and almost hard not to support the notch.
Right.
You basically just need to download the latest. You might have to make a couple of small changes and then recompile and upload the app. Like, it's pretty close to that simple. At least that's what I've heard. I haven't played with it myself. I don't know. Whereas with Android, you're going to have to go to Essential, get their add-on SDK for this, and specifically support it. Like, this is an intentional thing you're going to have to do with your app in order to make it work.
And there's no Essential phone emulator either. So developers, if they want to make sure it works, they'll have to go and buy one of these phones that no one buys in the first place, or at least compared to an iPhone X.
In other words, this is a problem that Google will have to solve.
Yeah.
Essential says this worked with them. So in theory, this is something Google could make easier somehow, but
I bet they could. Well, I think
no matter what.
I think Google could probably introduce some kind of API to probably handle some of this. You know,
the Notch API
under like within kind of just known boundaries. Like, we can work with a notch this big and your UI will look right generally. But again, that's going to require a new version of Android. Google obviously did not, unlike Apple, where Apple understood that this UI change was incoming because they built the phone. Google wasn't ready for this, and so they didn't learn about it until Essential was ready to tell them about it, which is probably just months before the phone launched.
Yep.
So I think that's definitely, a thing with the Essential phone. I will have to use it and get a sense of how much the notch really makes for annoyances on the Essential phone. I will say that, my experience with the iPhone X is that when software accommodates, little we'll say oddities in the display shape like that, it's fine. It doesn't bother me too much. So I think it's fixable, but yeah. I think with that, we've probably talked enough about the Essential phone forever. And we can talk about this.
The Nest thing is really cool.
The Nest thing is interesting. So this story, we're actually going to skip over a review we did because it's a Fitbit Ionic. If you guys really want to know about it, you should read the review on the site. Ryan reviewed it. Spoiler alert, it's not a very good smartwatch. And let's talk about Google and Nest. So according to a report from the Wall Street Journal, Google wants to integrate the Nest and Google hardware teams, which only makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It was very bizarre that they kept Nest as a separate entity when they did the reorganization in the first place. It would have made, because that's right around when Rick Osterloh was starting the hardware team. It would have made so much sense to just keep Nest as part of Google, but they didn't.
And for everyone that has no idea what we're talking about, obviously Google reorganized itself back in 2015, and they sort of made their own umbrella company called Alphabet, and a bunch of companies that used to be under Google went to being under Alphabet, and one of those was Nest. So for a couple years, Nest has just kind of been its own thing alongside Google, but with a little bit of overlap.
Well, and I think the reason that happened in the first place was basically to keep Tony Fadell around, wasn't it? Or at least for the little bit longer that they did. I admit I'm not totally caught up. Is he still there? I thought he left.
He did. Tony Fadell's gone.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that they split Nest off into Alphabet just to keep him around, and at the point where he left, it's like, okay, we don't have a good person leading this anyway. Let's start planning on bringing this in-house.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see them do this. I think it would be advantageous for Nest products and for Google's hardware division to have more integration. I think we saw kind of a hint of what that could mean at the hardware event back on October 4th, when they said, oh, hey, here's somebody from Nest to show how suddenly you can stream Nest video on your Chromecast. And that was super rad. I would like to see more things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think Nest integration, especially with the Assistant, is going to be super key as Google tries to take on Amazon and Echo and Alexa more and more in the smart home space. And I think Nest is obviously well positioned to do that. Nest is Nest is probably the most well-known name in household automation outside Philips Hue, I would say. I think Philips gets a lot of recognition.
Yeah. I mean, I think people like people know some of Google's home stuff too. Like Chromecast, I think is pretty well known at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if I doubt the branding will change. I bet there'll still be Nest products.
Oh yeah,
I think
Nest will definitely keep Nest.
It'll be Nest by Google.
Yeah, which kind of I brought this up on the show like I don't know a couple months ago. Like, why isn't it Nest Home? Like, I feel like it looks like a Nest product. It would make more sense to me. Like it can have Google Assistant built in, and Nest can be the hardware side.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that at the time they were like, but it's the Google Assistant. It should be Google Home. But yeah, I mean, they could just make like a Nest speaker that has Assistant in it. Everybody's making speakers that have Assistant in it now.
Yep, I think that would be a good idea, definitely.
And they're even updating their camera to have Google Assistant on it.
Yes, they are, which is great.
The Cam IQ.
Yeah, I think there are some concerns I've seen raised about privacy and the fact. So right now, Nest, for most of its cloud computing and storage needs, utilizes Amazon. Apparently, they haven't switched over to Google yet. They started sending some things over to Google's cloud side. Eventually, they will obviously fully integrate with Google's cloud services and storage and everything, so that all just works as part of Google. There are some concerns from some people that, well, privacy implications in terms of everything being on Google site now. There not being a firewall between Nest data, which is, in some cases, literally video of you in your home, and Google's data about you, and maybe how those two will intermingle. I think that's not a totally unwarranted concern in terms of general creepiness.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen. So I guess, make your decision. Do you want Nest or not?
Your Nest camera will hear you complaining about how uncomfy your bed is, and you'll start getting ads.
So no, the camera noticed you tossing and turning a lot last night. Are you interested in a new mattress?
Hey, we have a Google Opinions reward survey. Do you sleep well?
Watch this video of you sleeping last night.
If you answer yes, it's going to tell you, we're sorry. This response indicates that you are not being honest with us.
Have you recently had a nightmare?
No, it shows you a video of your nightmare. It's like, what was this about?
We noticed you tossed and turned consistently from 3 o'clock to 3:30. Could you rate your comfort on a scale of 1 to 10?
Would you recommend this stream to others?
I mean, how much Google Rewards credit do I get for this? I might be okay with that.
Ryan just sold me on it.
There you go. Oh, you know what I've noticed? So, Google Opinion Rewards, I'm completely derailless, is a thing on iOS. And on iOS, they give you PayPal credit.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, that's been going
right. Like, if I knew I could get that on, if I could get that on Google, of course I'd be going for PayPal. Because
David's never coming back.
I've racked up like $150. Like, that could have been a PayPal gift card.
Yeah, well, and if you're in certain other countries, it's also PayPal credit there. I know France is one of them. I'm not sure which other ones, but yeah, if you're on Android in those other countries, you get PayPal.
Damn it.
No, I want. It'd be cool if they offered an option.
I should just get like a used iPhone 5 or something and just put Opinion Rewards on there.
David's never coming back to Android.
No, I'm coming back to Android, and I'm going to embrace my notifications with just loving arms. Trust me, iOS is good for some things. It is very bad for others. And I will have a post about that probably, hopefully tomorrow. I should probably work on that. Anyway, so I think, God, there was something else I wanted to talk about that I'm completely forgetting. Oh, the fact that I've been using an iPhone for 2 weeks. We'll save that. We'll probably save that until after my final post goes up. So I'm using an iPhone X. I went and bought one. I'm going to use it for a month and completely switched over. I have not turned on my Pixel 2 XL in 10 days. So I am off and completely converted for the next 2.5 or so weeks remaining. And so far, it's fine. So So I'll tell you more about it, I guess, after the final post goes up. We're doing a series. I'm going to do a series of 5 posts on the site. One went up last week that you can read, which is kind of my general introduction to iOS, in which I learned I was wrong about many things about iOS. So that was fun. Basically, people gave me a tutorial on features that I didn't know were there, but are actually there. So that was good. The phone's gotten less annoying since, and so you'll be hearing more about me, or more from me about the phone. Tomorrow's post, if it goes up tomorrow, will be about the things that I've liked about the Switch, which will include some things that you would expect, and probably a couple things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about so much, hopefully, and give you some insight into that, and just kind of my the degree to which I've tried to fully immerse myself in the ecosystem, which I haven't. I still use Google services whenever humanly possible and convenient. So yeah, there'll be more about that on the site tomorrow. But with that, we're already running fairly long for this episode. I know we've been gone a while, so I wasn't trying to be too concerned about time.
We're making up for last time.
We are. Making up for lost time would be making up for like another hour-long episode, which I had scrapped because my microphone went haywire because I was using my laptop, which has weird electrical problems. But I think unless somebody else wants to talk about something else, which is fine with me. I mean, I'm free.
I think we can probably call it for this episode.
Okay.
It's been a feature-packed episode.
So I think the next episode you will be hearing from us. That was going to be in 2 weeks from now. So we'll be broadcasting on the 14th of December, trying to give you guys some notice here. And I will also be talking about on that episode specifically about I'm going to Hawaii next week with Qualcomm, and they're going to make some major announcements. And I am bragging a little bit. I'm sorry, everybody.
David gets to go on the cool press junkets.
Oh, yeah. David gets to do all the cool stuff.
I will fully disclose everything Qualcomm gives me. There's gonna be a little like cruise on Maui. So I will disclose all of this to you.
You know what? That's like necessary because that's the only place you can talk about gigabit LTE is on a cruise in Hawaii.
That's true. So there's going to be a lot of stuff. I've already, been subject to some briefings on a couple of things. I can probably comfortably say, yeah, one of the things isn't an Android thing, but it's pretty exciting, regardless, at least in my opinion. So I think look out for what's happening next week with Qualcomm. I think you're going to see some things that are very exciting, whether or not you care about Snapdragon or whether or not you care about non-Android things too, maybe. I think there's going to be some pretty cool stuff, and we'll be bringing you stories from the event and all of that. So with that, I guess that's all for this week. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Jordan.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my job.
Oh, CES. Carson brings up CES. So we will be going to CES next year, but that's like a month and like 5 weeks from now. So Jordan and I will be going to CES in Las Vegas this year. I have no idea what's going to be at CES. I never have a good idea of what's going to be at CES because mobile is just not the intense focus there anymore. We'll get some stories out to you. We'll try to find some of the weird stuff, which is part of
the Android-powered refrigerators, or
maybe. I'm sure Android will be on something dumb. That's kind of a given at CES, I think. So we'll be there. Garank says, bring Zach. We're not bringing any of the video team this year. CES has just not become as focused on mobile products as I would like in order to dedicate our resources in a big way, unfortunately. So we will be there, and we'll just be producing written content for you. MWC will bring some of the video team over, definitely, and you'll have some video content. And I guess as a podcast sneak peek, I don't know how many people actually listen to this. Actually, I guess I do. I see the numbers. We are bringing on a new person to the video channel. And you will see his first video probably at the end of next week. we're very excited to have him on, and we hope that he will be a regular presence on the channel going forward. So, yeah, I guess now I will actually end the episode. All right.
Good night.
Thank you, Jordan. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like the end.
No,
I just feel weird about it if we don't get like a
weird.
good night.
I don't feel comfortable not doing that, so
Yeah, great.
I'm glad you're in agreement.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, I've stopped the recording, and I'm going to stop the broadcast right